showtime, folks.
Greetings, Earthlets, and welcome to another episode of Into the Music. I'm joined by my colleague, Andy. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing well. I'd also like to not alienate any of the Martians that are out there that might be tuning in, so you all are welcome here as well. But I'm doing great, John. How you doing?
Yeah, I never like the Martians. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wonderfully buoyant tonight, I'll have to say.
Good. I'm glad you're staying afloat, man. That's all you can do, right?
Exactly. So it is time for me to assault your eardrums with another offering from the gods of rock.
Oh, you're setting quite a bar there.
Yeah. No, this is I think this will make you sit up and listen. You must have heard of, well, I say must have. I never know what translates across the pond. So have you heard of the band, the Jesus and Mary Chain?
Yes. And it's funny you mentioned like how it translates, because like I've heard of the band, but I've never heard any of their music. But it's another one of those instances where I heard about them through the artists mentioning them, whether it was like in an interview or what have you, having like citing this band as being a good band, perhaps underrated or not hitting it big in the United States for whatever reason. I'm sure that there's other people who aren't musicians who like Jesus and the Mary Chain as well. But whenever I hear it from a musician that I respect or whose music I'm fond of, I tend to try to make a point to listen to it and give it a shot, because if it, inspired them and I like their music, perhaps, I'll find something in it as well. But I haven't got around to it with Jesus and the Mary Chain. So this is like a perfect opportunity for me to be able to do just that. So thank you for offering it up. What is the, not that this is going to be any indication, because I know I haven't heard it, but just what's the name of the track?
Well, for your maiden voyage into the Jesus and Mary Chain land, it is a song called Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray. Okay. That makes me think of a really cheesy band from like the late 90s, early 2000s. And it also makes me think of boxing. But I'm sure it's not about either of those.
It's not about any of those things.
Yeah.
Kind of hard and fast rule, the Jesus and Mary Chain. It's usually drugs. But anyway.
Okay.
I'm not saying it is in this instance, but, we'll see. So go check it out and return.
That overdrive on the bass is thick and chunky. No, I dig it. I really like this sound. This is interesting. I've really wanted to listen to the Jesus and the Mary Chain for a while. I know they've influenced some bands that I listen to. And I've just heard their name bandied about, but never got around to it. So thanks, John. This has been, so far, a minute of good music. Let's see how it progresses.
To
That I dare I call it a lead. Whatever that little interlude portion there. Simple but really effective, fabulous work on the guitar, and while it was simple, the effects that they employed were pretty complex. I mean, they had a distortion on the guitar that was at a level that it wasn't before that point. Just the sound quality of it was really great. I'm going to take it back because I enjoyed it. Okay, I loved what they did with the guitar in that part, which was a lot different from the last part we just discussed where the guitar shined. But I really could have used those levels to come up a little bit so I could really relish it. I had to sift a little bit, but man, I liked what I heard. The classic fade out. You don't hear that enough anymore.
Because after
oh, thanks, commercial. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I don't know when this particular song came out. I mean, I know when the band was about, but I don't know for how long I just don't know much about the band, but it doesn't sound that old to me. And it has a very a sound that would be very relevant today if it were to have been like released sometime recently. So yeah, I'll be interested to talk to John about this and get some more information about these guys.
So I see that they've had you scrubbed clean and brought back.
They did, yeah. They may be presentable for the masses, and by masses I mean the 100 people that'll probably watch this video. But yeah, took some notes, some post-listen notes here to bring back to the table for you. I liked it. I did enjoy it.
Cool.
I really liked the fuzzed out overdrive bass that was used in this. Super fuzzy and chunky, filled a lot of space. So that was right in my wheelhouse. I don't know what genre this band is, which is probably good. And I don't even know if this is an indication as to their sound as a whole or just a sound that they went for on this track. But there were like hints of industrial rock elements to this song. Not as a whole. I don't even know if I would classify the song as an industrial rock song, but I found that there were parts where I was like, almost it sounds like Trent Reznor light, like it's not super leaning into the industrial sound, but there are elements there for certain. And I definitely dug that. And that was something that I wasn't anticipating at all. The voice, the singer, very, very 90s voice to me. And maybe even early 90s, kind of like alternative rock type sounding vocals is sort of what I picked up from it. I don't know if that is an appropriate summation of the guy's talent or not, but that's sort of what I got from this one listen.
No, sorry, you're way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1958. No, I'm joking.
Industrial rock in 1958. Yeah.
1992.
1992. Okay. Well, all right. Okay. Early 90s. I feel vindicated. I loved the sort of, at points, the guitar was used almost like as like this ancillary sound element in portions of it where there was like scratching and like more effective guitar use than like traditional guitar use, which that also kind of stood out to me as like an interesting element to the song. The guitar was there was like a simple, I think there were two of these. The first guitar, and I use this term loosely, lead, because it really wasn't a lead, but it was this element that the guitar hadn't yet introduced to the song yet, that while very simple, was very effective. I really, really liked that portion where the guitar does that. And then almost in a blink of an eye or a turn of a page, the guitar does this other thing that's lead oriented that I liked even more. But my beef with that is that I had to sift in order to find it. Like I wanted that part to be raised and in the forefront a bit more. And I kind of had to look to find it. And that's the only critique I would have given the song, like from a musical standpoint, is like, and I don't even know if it's a musical because the music's great. It just, the levels need to come up on that so it can really stand out and be the star that I think it wanted to be. But yeah, I said, while it sounds of the 90s, it also sounds oddly more contemporary than that. In that, if this song was released within the last couple of years, I think it would have, or this album, perhaps that's saying too much because I haven't heard the entire album. But this song sounds like it would do well now. Like I don't hear it and go, oh, this is certainly antiquated. Oh, this is from 1958, for instance. But there is like,
the fool would say that.
Yeah. There is this I don't know, this element to it that seems like it would translate well to even now. And I'm not sure when it came out, though. You said 1992. Is that when they formed, or is that when this album and song were released?
This album and song, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then credit to them, because here we are 30 years later, and it still sounds like it would go over well, I think, with a mass audience. But maybe I'm naive in saying that because I started this all off with, I don't know how big, I don't think they're that big in America. They don't have a huge following. And yet I think this music should or warrants more attention, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely had their time in the sun in the UK in terms of popularity. They had a number of sort of top 20 hits, but they were never going to be a particularly sort of popularist band. They're still going to this day in certain forms, but okay, I'll tell you a bit about them and So they formed in 1985. They are basically two brothers called Jim and William Reed, and then other members of the band have come and gone in very quick rotation, but it's those two. So they come from Scotland, from East Kilbride, which is just sort of southwest of Glasgow. And they are basically from 1985 to 1999. They split up, and then they reformed again in 2007, and are still sort of going to this day in various forms. There's a lot of stories about the name, but the most reliable sort of story is that it was from advert on the back of a cereal packet that, you know, purchasers could send off for the Jesus and Mary chain for only with so many tokens they would get it cheap price. And for some reason they had a lot of other names before, and there were the Poppy Seeds, the Death of Joey was another, you know, name for the band, and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, they settled.
Wait, there was something advertised on the back of a cereal box with like proof of purchases you could send in for this. Like we had that when I was a kid here. What is a Jesus and the Mary chain? What do you like? I wouldn't even, if I set that off, I wouldn't even know what the hell I was getting in return. I'd be like, I don't know.
I don't know, but it's kind of charming and ridiculous at the same time, which is basically what the band is as well. So
the one thing I'll say is that, like, book by cover, whatever, like I always thought that was a cool ass name. Whenever I heard whenever I hear it, it's like, oh, that sounds like a badass name. But this is a very interesting, like, origin story for how it became their band name.
So when they started, they sort of had their feet in two camps of music. They were hugely influenced by the Stooges and by Velvet Underground.
Okay.
But also by the Ronettes and Phil Spector. And they wanted to bring those together. And when they started, they kind of sounded really a lot like the Ramones. And they weren't happy with that sound. They were very limited in terms of their skill and whatever. They would get up and do it. And they would actually turn up to gigs claiming to be the support band when they weren't booked, go on, do 10, 15 minutes and then bugger off before people could catch them and incarcerate them. And then most of their gigs, they admit, were fueled by taking speed beforehand. And I think, you know, I got them through it. And so for a very long time, even when they became successful, they would only do 20-minute sets because, you know, they were struggling to do more than it's just
because
funny.
of their limit or their ceiling in talent.
And also sort of cognitiveness as well. They would probably pass out.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So they changed their sound, whacked in this distortion, and, you know, as they say, the rest is history. They went through lots of different sort of, I've got some notes here. So they were struggling, they moved down to London, they were struggling, and they did a gig, and Alan McGee at the time, running Creation Records, saw them on the basis of one gig, signed them for a one record deal. They put together a single, and at the time they were so limited, the drummer only had 2 drums in his kit. The bass player, and I have to read this out.
Constitutes a kit.
Wow. The bass player was a guy called Hart. I can't remember what his first name is, but anyway, he only had 3 strings on his bass. And by 1985, it was down to 2 strings. And in Hart's words, that's the 2 I use. I mean, what's the effing point of spending money on another 2? 2's enough. So that was the bass player. They then rotating stuff, and in came Bobby Gillespie, who had already set up Primal Scream, but he played drums with them. And some of their live performances were legendary, and there was one where it kicked off a little bit. They stormed off after 20 minutes, sort of drug-fueled, and the audience went mad and threw bottles at the stage. This got escalated in a tabloid story that there was a riot at their gigs, and they were suddenly labelled the next Sex Pistols. And rumors of violence and drug taking were rampant, and they were even banned by sort of local councils from playing in certain areas of the country. And the drugs thing was completely true. The violence was a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, because they went and played on, I think it was in Holland or Luxembourg at a TV thing, and they trashed their set because the TV director of the show asked them to. And it then became a thing that destruction of the set, the surrounding property, their instruments happened at the end of the gig, whether it was them doing it or the audience storming the stage and doing it. It was just chaos. And they got really sick of it. Anyway, fast forward a little bit. They brought out their first album at the end of 85 called Psycho Candy. I think, yeah, there it is. Now, this is a landmark album. It's just incredible. It's not for the casual listener, but this, along with a couple of Cocteau Twin records and some other stuff, laid the foundation for shoegaze. It really did. And it has this amazing, a lot of the songs are based in that sort of Phil Spector sound, and then they've put it through the grinder with distortion, etc. So one of their first tracks uses the drum beat from Be My Baby, the dum, 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 you know, and stuff like that. I picked up this EP, Some Candy Talking EP, and Never Look Back. I absolutely fell in love with them. It's a fantastic album. They then brought out their second album, Darklands. Here we go. So this is a really marked copy. Slightly more softer sound, really beautiful songs on there, but still had that sort of backbone of that sort of a bit of the sort of rampant guitars and fuzz, but some really, really beautiful songs. Very interesting. They then brought out their next album, which I absolutely adore, called Automatic. They took a lot of stick for that album because they had programmable bass and drum parts to it. So it was really, they put down this spine, which is fairly uninspiring to all the songs, but then they whacked in incredible guitars. Some really, really fantastic songs on there, and it's one of my favorites. And then they brought out this album, Honey's Dead, which is supposed to get back to that more full grungy sound. And this song is, you know, fairly representative of the whole album. I love, and the reason I gave it to you, I thought this is probably a nice sort of amalgamation of their different sounds. So you have that dirty, grungy guitar sound. You're quite right. I mean, not only did they help invent shoegaze, but, and I know no one operates within a bubble, but they definitely influenced the industrial sound as well. Some of their, on the previous album, this. And again, they would have been co-influenced by others as well, you know, so it all works together. But, you know, they're a very important band in terms of the sounds from the late 80s, early 90s. Their next album, Stoned and Dethroned, I haven't got. It's a decent album. For some reason, it didn't grab me, and I don't know why, because it's a really good album. They did another album after that in '98 called Monkey, which again is decent, and then they split up. They basically had exhausted themselves through their antics and drug use and alcohol use, and one of them collapsed on stage and, you know, couldn't talk or let alone sing. And,
Jesus.
you know, and I was just in Japan, you know, and they've been touring and doing stuff. They, you know, they tour the States a bit, but they usually sort of sabotage their own sort of success by going overboard in one way or another, you know, and screwing things up. But I think if you listen to the albums, the progression in their songwriting is incredible. From these guys who could barely do anything in '85 through to these amazing tunes. And this is quite a complex arrangement. I wouldn't say it's a complex song, but the way it's all put together with that overall sort of grungy, filthy noise to it, with these other little bits sprinkled in, like you said, the industrial noise, and you know, and their vocals have never been particularly strong. They share vocals, really, Jim and William, that alternates, but it does the trick. It really does, you know.
Yeah, I can't. Can't help but think. I mean, you're telling, providing a lot of information and backstory to all this. And the one thing that I kept thinking was like, for the story of how shit musicians they were, like this, what I heard doesn't speak to that. Like that would I would not have assumed this was the product of guys who didn't know what they were doing on their instruments, and probably because this song wasn't. But at some point, the guys who weren't this iteration that I experienced to the song, perhaps earlier on, they were more rudimentary and wild in their approach to music. But the other thing that was interesting was, like, I mentioned the two guitar parts, right? The two, if you want to classify them as the two leads. Yeah. And they are very different in sound, like the effect that they use, even just the what I would imagine the approach to writing was different. And that was, to me, that use of dynamics in a song is impressive. And I think kind of goes with what you're saying, like, neither of those parts were musically difficult, but the choice to put them close to one another while being that, like, different, completely different, and still making it work within the same song is pretty interesting, and like an innovative way to write your music or organize it and orchestrate it. So I was impressed that they would have done that. After I heard the first lead, I was certain that was the closest thing I was going to get to sort of any like frou-frou guitar stuff happening on it. And they surprised me just seconds later. So yeah, and it's interesting that you're crediting them as sort of a pioneer in industrial sound, when that's kind of what I heard flirtations of in and throughout this track. And I suppose, like you said, I'm sorry, again, 92, right? This album came out.
Yeah. But this is their fourth album, at this point.
Yeah, their fourth album. And like I don't know if industrial really had its sea legs at that point, you know what I mean? So I can't argue the fact that you're right. If this was a new sound for them and in 92, then yeah, it is kind of leading the way in what would become. And even technology at that point wasn't fully ready for what industrial would become just years later, with all these, changes in sound manipulation, modulation, and recording. Kind of neat that they were able to, perhaps, even if accidentally, forecast that or capture that early enough to get some credit for it, especially when you couple it with the fact that you're also crediting them with being pioneers in shoegaze. It's like, those are two same subgenres of rock and roll. And yet here is this band, this like duo from Scotland, who obviously had other people helping them, but kind of putting their footprint in both paths. And that's, you got to respect that. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some early footage of them, and I can't say when. It was probably 84, 85. I've got a vague feeling at my back of my mind that they played on the Old Grey Whistle Test. I might be wrong. Mm-hmm. I think they did. And the set that they did for that, it's just awful. It was terrible. It's basically sort of this feedback noise with a backing click tape. Bobby Gillespie's trying to drum, and he can barely stand up. He's off his noodle. But it was something interesting about it. But I would not have rushed out and bought it. And I'm guessing within the year they bring out, as I say, this landmark album, which is a lot, both beautiful and alarming in equal measure. And my God, probably the most interesting album of that year, if not the years either side of it as well, in terms of its sonic landscape. And it really, I'd say the only other people that were doing something that was even within the ballpark would have been Cocteau Twins at that time. But that was the sort of dreamier side of shoegaze. And I think then the genius of what Kevin Shields did, he went away from being this awful Cramps sound-like band, and then suddenly coming back with, we've discovered the Jesus and Mary chain, and we put our own bent on it. And he did, he took it several leagues further. But yeah, it wouldn't, they definitely put the flag in the ground for someone else to pick up and carry on.
there's something almost comedic about their perseverance and resilience in spite of themselves. Like they've seemed like everything that would have held them back would have been self-induced, and yet
Oh, yeah.
they still got beyond all that to gain. I mean, if you're off your tits playing, drums on the Old Grey Whistle Test and you're like, it sounds like dog shit, who thinks you're going to have another time in the sun after that? You know what I mean?
And their records have been banned as well. So, I mean, I think it was this one. I'm pretty sure it was that one was banned by Radio 1, which is the biggest radio station in the whole of the UK at the time, because it was clearly about drugs. And for over a year, they said, no, it wasn't. And then after about a year, they went, yeah, it was. And then this one, which is it's off the same album. Yeah, they did it. Sorry, I won't. No, it's not that one. They did a song called Reverence, which was the lead single off Honeystead album. And the lyrics in it go something like, I want to die like Jesus Christ. I want to die like JFK. And the BBC didn't like that. So again, just didn't play it. They were pulled from the stuff. And I mean, even like their first single, it's called Upside Down. And they wanted the B-side to be called Jesus F. Well, the guys who worked on the record printing press originally refused to work on the record because the B-side was called Suck. But they went ahead when they were given the alternative, which was a song called Jesus F. And okay, yeah, we'll do Suck then. So there is this sense of sabotaging going on. Like they didn't really know how to play the game. They just thought, we'll do whatever we want, And Alan McGee at Creation, I mean, they then signed to a subsection of Warner Brothers, but during the early years, he considered anything, this negativity about violence at their gigs as, it's just publicity. And it did help, I guess, push their name forward. I mean, they, as you say, they kind of stumbled towards victory rather than.
That's exactly like fell ass backwards, drunk off their ass into this cult following notoriety where they get to be, standard bearers for two genres of music or subgenres of music. And I get it. They don't have like the hugest following, but sometimes there's something cool about the element of being like, one of these unsung heroes that are sort of legendary only in the circles of rock music. It's like the comedian who is the comedian's comedian. Like he doesn't have the biggest following. He's not doing stadium shows, but all the comedians think he's the funniest writer in the room and joke teller in the room, and they gravitate toward it. There's something cool about that. You know what I mean? Because your street cred among your contemporaries couldn't be higher, and that's who you want to run with anyway. So what are the opinions of others matter?
That's it. I mean, I guess, the people in the know and the people who should know, it's a bit like that sort of, it's not quite the same thing, but it's like the Velvet Underground thing. It's like they didn't sell any records, but everybody who bought their records formed a band, and that's their influence, So it's a similar sort of thing, But yeah, they're a favorite of mine. They were, again, they offered something different at the time. I mean, really different. And I've always had a soft spot for them,
Well, no, I can understand why, especially thinking about that time period, right? Like when you're fishing for something new and you hear these two different sounds that you haven't heard in rock with shoegaze and touches of industrial sounds that would have been new at the time. I could definitely see how I probably would have done the same thing. Very innovative, even if accidental.
No, great. Okay. Do you want to wrap things up?
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing, first of all. And if you in the listening or watching audience are fans of Jesus and the Mary Chain, or perhaps just someone like myself who's hearing them for the first time and you have something to say, please feel free to use the comments field below. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell anyone who will listen. And we'd love to see you guys all back here again on Into the Music.
Bye-bye.